Sophia's laugh cut through the low hum of conversation, rising above the clinking glasses and murmured voices that filled the art gallery. The sound used to put me at ease, a warm reminder of why I'd fallen for her in the first place. Now, it had a different effect, a twist of discomfort deep in my chest that I couldn't quite explain. I watched her from across the room, talking animatedly with a group of artists near a vivid abstract painting. Her dark hair flowed over her shoulders, catching the soft gallery lighting, and she gestured with a grace that drew people into her orbit. She had that effect. People wanted to listen to her, to get close. They used to include me. It was supposed to be a date night, just the two of us, appreciating art and enjoying each other's company. But I couldn't help but feel like a stranger in her world these days, an outsider watching her charm everyone around her. And she seemed to be drifting further away every time we were together. My eyes drifted to the man she kept glancing at, a tall figure standing near the far wall, his hands casually tucked into the pockets of a sleek black coat. He wasn't looking at the art. He was looking at her. Their eyes met for just a moment, and she smiled, a small, private smile that twisted the unease in my gut into something darker. I pretended to be absorbed in a painting nearby, but I watched them from the corner of my eye, trying to catch every detail. After a few more minutes, Sophia excused herself from her group and drifted toward the bar. She glanced over her shoulder, as if checking to see if he was still there. I followed, taking a roundabout path through the room, trying to seem casual. When I reached her side, she turned, looking surprised. "Oh, David, there you are. I thought you were mingling." Her voice was light, but her eyes flicked to the side, toward the man. I forced a smile. "Just taking in the scene? Seems like you've made some new friends." She shrugged, her lips curving in a way that could have been amusement or something else entirely. "People are friendly tonight. You should meet them. There's some great connections here. Might be good for your firm." It was a deft deflection, shifting the focus onto me. But I couldn't let go of the tension in my chest. "Who's that guy you keep looking at?" Sophia raised an eyebrow, but she didn't glance back toward the man. "Who? I'm not looking at anyone." "You're being paranoid, David." "Paranoid." The word stung, but I let it go, forcing myself to nod and take a sip of my drink. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just the stress from work. Late nights at the firm, endless projects, trying to secure a promotion that seemed perpetually out of reach. I told myself that I should trust her. After all, she'd never given me a reason not to. But the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important, some detail that lingered just outside my vision. And every time I caught a glimpse of that man across the room, he seemed to be watching us with a knowing smile. It wasn't until a few days later that the real doubts began to take shape. I came home late from a long day at the firm, my head buzzing with exhaustion and frustration. The condo was quiet, except for the sound of running water in the bathroom. Sophia's voice drifted through the door, low and soft, as if she were speaking to someone on the phone. I knew I shouldn't eavesdrop, but I couldn't help myself. I moved closer, pressing my ear to the gap in the doorframe. Her words were muffled, but I caught enough to send a chill down my spine. "I told you it's under control. He doesn't suspect anything. No, we'll keep it on schedule." There was a pause, and then her voice softened, dropping to a tone I hadn't heard in a long time. "Just trust me, okay?" I stepped back, my mind reeling. The water stopped, and I quickly moved away from the door, trying to look casual as I flipped through the mail. Sophia emerged a few moments later, wrapped in a towel, her expression unreadable. She flashed me a quick smile. "Hey, you're home early. I was just finishing up a long day." "You were on the phone?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She hesitated, but only for a second. "Oh, just catching up with a friend. You know, the usual." I forced a smile, nodding along, but my thoughts were racing. The way she'd sounded, like she was hiding something, like she was keeping secrets. The next morning, I woke up before her, and while she showered, I picked up her phone from the nightstand. My hands shook as I scrolled through her messages, feeling a pang of guilt with every swipe. Most of them were normal friends, co-workers, mundane details. But then I saw one that made my blood run cold. A conversation with an unknown number. The latest message read, "He won't see it coming. Are you ready?" I took a screenshot, my heart hammering in my chest. When I heard the water shut off, I quickly put the phone back in its place, slipping into the kitchen to make coffee, pretending nothing had happened. But my mind was a whirlwind. What could they be talking about? Who was she messaging? Sophia came in a few minutes later, toweling her hair dry, and kissed me on the cheek. Thanks for making coffee, babe. I smiled back, my face a mask. No problem. Hey, I saw you got a weird text this morning. Someone asked if you were ready for something. She froze, just for a second, then turned back to the coffee machine with a shrug. Oh, that? It's just from a friend. They're helping me plan a surprise for you for your birthday. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my expression neutral. A surprise, huh? That's nice of you. She smiled brightly, and for a moment, I almost believed her. But then she picked up her phone, quickly swiping through her messages, and I knew she was deleting the conversation. A knot formed in my stomach as I realized just how deeply I'd begun to doubt her. That evening, I tried to act normal, pretending that everything was fine, but the unease clung to me like a shadow. When I asked Sophia how her day was, she gave vague answers, her eyes drifting to her phone every few minutes. I thought about the unknown number, about her whispered words in the bathroom, about the man at the gallery. Maybe it was just my imagination, stress making me see things that weren't there. Or maybe I was finally seeing the truth, seeing the cracks beneath the surface of the life I thought I'd built with her. But I couldn't confront her directly. Not yet. I needed more than just a suspicious text. I needed proof. And if Sophia was hiding something from me, I would find out what it was, no matter what it took. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many more lies she had hidden beneath that perfect smile. I couldn't let it go. The text, the way Sophia had smiled through her lie, it haunted me. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the knot in my stomach never loosened. Every time she left the condo, I caught myself wondering where she was really going, who she was meeting. And then there was Leo, that man at the gallery, the one whose presence had sent chills through me. His image lingered in my mind, a shadow over every moment I spent with Sophia. I needed to know who he was, what he had to do with her, and what secrets she was keeping. I tried to follow her movements casually at first, but Sophia was always a few steps ahead, leaving the house with just enough time to make sure I couldn't follow her easily. She seemed to sense my growing tension, her touches and reassurances feeling more like distractions than genuine affection. It only made me more determined. So I called Eric. Eric and I had been friends for years, college roommates who had stayed in touch, even after life had pulled us in different directions. He'd gone into private security work, doing a lot of the things that I thought only happened in movies. Surveillance, digital tracking, finding out secrets people didn't want known. He owed me a favor from a time I'd bailed him out of trouble with the law, and I figured it was time to collect. We met at a bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where no one asked questions and the music was too loud for anyone to overhear. Eric was already nursing a beer when I slid into the booth across from him. "Long time, no see, David," he said, looking me over with a smirk. "What's got you so jumpy?" I forced a smile, trying to act like I hadn't spent the last week digging through my girlfriend's phone records. "It's complicated. I need your help with something, and I need you to keep it between us." Eric raised an eyebrow, but his expression softened when he saw the look on my face. "You know me, man. I can keep a secret. What's going on?" I hesitated, wondering how much to tell him, then decided there was no point in holding back. I told him about Sophia, about the strange messages and the man from the gallery. He listened, his expression unreadable, and when I was done, he took a long swig of his beer. "Sounds like you've got yourself in a bit of a mess," he said finally. "You really think she's hiding something?" "I don't know what to think anymore," I admitted, feeling the weight of those words. "But I can't just sit around and ignore it. I need to know who this Leo guy is, and I need to know what she's been doing behind my back." Eric nodded slowly, scratching his stubbled chin. "All right, I can look into it. Find out who this Leo is. Maybe dig into Sophia's movements if you're sure that's what you want. But you gotta be careful, David. If she finds out you're spying on her, things could get ugly fast." I shrugged, trying to hide the dread curling in my stomach. "I'm already past the point of no return. Just find out what you can, okay?" He agreed, and I left the bar feeling a mixture of relief and guilt. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but every time I pictured that message on Sophia's phone, I reminded myself that I didn't have a choice. Eric worked quickly. Within a few days, he sent me a file with the basics on Leo. His full name was Leo Carver, and he had a reputation. Former real estate investor turned con man. He'd been implicated in several financial schemes over the years, usually targeting wealthy business people with too much trust and too little oversight. He'd slipped through the cracks each time, either by bribing the right people or turning state's evidence against his own partners. But there was something else that caught my attention. Leo had a history of targeting people through those close to them. Friends, lovers, family members, anyone who could get him inside their lives without raising suspicion. The pieces began to click together in my mind, forming a picture I didn't want to see. I imagined Leo whispering in Sophia's ear, promising her a cut of whatever he planned to take from me. I imagined her sitting with him at that private bar, talking about keeping it on schedule. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was she just another of Leo's victims? Or had she gone into this willingly, using our relationship as a stepping stone to something more? I decided to find out for myself. One evening, I followed Sophia when she left the house, keeping my distance as she drove across town. She parked in front of a sleek, upscale hotel, a place she'd never mentioned to me before. I watched as she stepped out of the car, looking around as if checking for followers, before slipping through the glass doors. I followed, my heart hammering in my chest, and managed to catch sight of her in the lobby, speaking to Leo. I ducked behind a potted plant, straining to hear their conversation, but they kept their voices low, glancing around the room. Sophia's posture was tense, her back straight, while Leo leaned in closer, gesturing as if he was giving instructions. My breath caught when I heard Sophia's voice, just loud enough to catch a few words. "He can't find out? No, I'm not backing out now. We're too close." I slipped out of the lobby before they could see me, the weight of what I'd heard pressing down on my chest. I drove home in silence, replaying their conversation over and over, trying to figure out what it meant. Was she being blackmailed, like she claimed? Or was she willingly playing a part in whatever Leo had planned? When she came home later that night, she greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, the same sweet smile she always wore. But now, all I could see were the lies behind it. The next morning, I decided to confront her, gently at first, testing the waters. As we sat over breakfast, I mentioned the hotel casually. "I saw you went downtown last night, to that hotel near the river. What were you doing there?" Sophia's smile faltered, just for a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, that? Just meeting a friend. She needed some advice about personal stuff." I tried to keep my voice steady, but the bitterness bled through. "Funny, I thought you were meeting Leo, that guy from the gallery." Her face went pale, but she recovered almost immediately, her expression hardening. "Were you following me, David? What the hell is wrong with you? You're lying to me, Sophia?" I snapped, my frustration spilling over. "I heard you talking to him. I know there's more going on than you're telling me." She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. "This isn't about me, David. It's about you not trusting me. You've been paranoid for weeks now, acting like I'm the enemy. Do you know how that makes me feel?" Her voice cracked, but I couldn't tell if it was real or just another act. I wanted to believe her, wanted to think that I was the one in the wrong. But then I remembered the message, the way she'd looked at Leo, the way she had checked for followers outside the hotel. I took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "I just want the truth, Sophia. If you care about me, you'll tell me what's really going on." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes, but there was a hardness behind them that I couldn't ignore. "You need to stop digging into things you don't understand. Trust me, or this is over." I watched her walk away, my mind swirling with anger and confusion. She was hiding something, I was sure of it. But if I pushed too hard, I risked losing her completely. And despite everything, I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. I paced the length of the living room, trying to control the storm of emotions raging inside me. Was she telling the truth? Or was this just another way to manipulate me, to keep me off balance while she and Leo tightened the noose around my neck? Finally, I turned back to her, forcing myself to keep my voice steady. "Let's say I believe you. What does Leo want? Why is he targeting me? And why the hell are you helping him? Sophia sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Leo and we knew each other years ago, before you and I met. He helped me out when I was in a bad spot, some debt, some trouble I got into. At first, I thought he was just trying to help me, but then he started asking for favors, pulling me into his schemes. She glanced up at me, eyes glistening with tears. When I met you, it was real, David. I swear. But Leo found out about our relationship, about your firm's success. He said he needed a way in, needed information, and if I didn't give it to him, he'd ruin us both. He forced me to dig into your life, to find weak spots he could exploit. I didn't want to, but he left me no choice. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe that she was just another pawn in Leo's game, that the woman I'd loved for 2 years wasn't capable of this kind of betrayal. But the doubts clawed at my mind, tearing at the trust one had left. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me sooner? She wrapped her arms around herself, her shoulders shaking. I was scared, David. Scared that you wouldn't believe me, that you'd think I was just using you. And maybe you're right to think that I've done things I'm not proud of. But I'm telling you the truth now. Leo is dangerous, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants. I stood over her, fists clenched, every nerve in my body screaming to walk away, to end this twisted game right there. But I couldn't. Her tears, the tremble in her voice, there was something raw and real about it, something that broke through my anger. Even if she was lying, I couldn't ignore the possibility that she was telling the truth. And if Leo was as dangerous as she claimed, walking away might only make things worse. What's his plan then? I asked, forcing myself to meet her gaze. If he's got all this dirt on me, what's he planning to do with it? Sophia took a deep breath, steadying herself. He wants to ruin you, take everything you have, and then disappear with the money. He's done it before, to other people. He uses their secrets against them, blackmails them into signing over assets, then vanishes before the authorities can catch up. But he doesn't know that I kept some of the evidence. I've got recordings of him, proof that he's been forcing me into this. I studied her, searching for any hint of deception. And what do you want from me, Sophia? What's your endgame here? She reached out, grabbing my hand, her grip tight and desperate. Help me, David. Help me get out from under his thumb. We can turn the tables on him, give the evidence to the police in this. Please. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I'm begging you. I pulled my hand away, taking a step back. Why should I believe you now? She looked at me, her expression raw with something that might have been guilt or fear. Because you don't have a choice. If you don't help me, he'll come after you next. And I don't want to see you get hurt. I stared at her, torn between the urge to trust her and the dark suspicion that this was just another move in a game I didn't fully understand. But I couldn't ignore the logic of her argument. If Leo was planning something big, I needed to know what it was. And I needed someone on the inside to give me the leverage I lacked. Fine, I said finally, the word heavy with reluctance. I'll help you. But if you're lying to me, Sophia, if I find out this is just another trick. She nodded quickly, her face lighting up with relief. I understand, David. Thank you. I promise. I'll prove that I'm on your side. I swallowed back the bitterness in my throat. We'll see about that. Sophia and I spent the next few days planning our next move, but the tension between us was palpable, like a live wire stretched too tight. She gave me access to her recordings, grainy audio files of conversations with Leo, where he threatened her and outlined parts of his plan. There were fragments about my firm, about falsified documents and offshore accounts. It was damning evidence, but it was also incomplete, like a puzzle missing key pieces. As we worked together, I couldn't help but watch her closely, searching for signs that she was holding something back. Sometimes, I'd catch a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, a nervous glance at her phone that made me wonder if she was still in touch with Leo behind my back. But whenever I pressed her, she'd look at me with those wide, earnest eyes, and I'd find myself wavering. We arranged for her to meet with Leo again, pretending to continue their plan. I would watch from a distance, armed with a recording device, hoping to catch him in the act of threatening her. If we could get him to admit his intentions on tape, we might have enough to bring to the police. The night of the meeting, Sophia looked over at me as she adjusted her coat, her expression unreadable. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no going back. I met her gaze, trying to ignore the nagging doubt in my chest. Let's just get it over with. She nodded, then slipped out the door, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I followed her a few minutes later, driving to the location she'd chosen, a private bar in an old part of town, the kind of place where people went to have conversations they didn't want overheard. I parked a block away, creeping along the shadows until I had a clear view of the bar's entrance. Through the window, I saw Sophia sit down at a corner booth. Leo appeared a few minutes later, sliding into the seat across from her with an easy smile. I flipped on the recorder and strained to hear their voices, my heart pounding in my ears. You look tense, Sophia, Leo's voice drawled, smooth and mocking. Having second thoughts? Sophia's response was low and clipped. I just want to make sure this ends cleanly. You promised that David wouldn't get hurt. Leo chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl. Don't worry about him. He'll be fine as long as he stays out of our way. But you're the one I'm worried about. You seem distracted. She hesitated, glancing around as if sensing my presence. You've made your point, Leo. Just tell me what I need to do next. There was a pause. Then Leo leaned forward, his tone turning cold. I think you've forgotten your place, Sophia. Don't forget who got you into this. And don't forget what happens if you try to double-cross me. Sophia flinched, and for a moment, I almost believed her fear was genuine. But then Leo's next words froze the blood in my veins. Or have you grown too attached to him? You're still pretending, right? Don't tell me you've actually started to care about the guy. Sophia's face hardened, and she forced a brittle laugh. You know me better than that, Leo. He's just a means to an end. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the recorder. My vision blurred, rage and disbelief boiling up inside me. She was playing both sides, still loyal to Leo, still willing to throw me to the wolves if it meant saving herself. I barely managed to stay long enough to catch the end of their conversation. Leo laid out the final steps of their plan, discussing timelines and transfers, but I hardly heard the details. All I could think about was the cold way she'd spoken about me, as if I was just another obstacle in her path. When they finally left the bar, I slipped away, heading back to my car with the recorder clutched in my hand. I replayed the conversation in my head, over and over, trying to process what I'd heard. By the time I got back home, Sophia was already there, sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for me. Her face was pale, but she tried to smile when she saw me. Did you get what you needed? I looked at her, the rage burning behind my eyes, and for a moment, I wanted to scream at her, to throw the recorder at her feet, and demand to know why she'd lied to me. But I forced myself to stay calm. If she thought I was still playing along, I might have a chance to turn this around. Yeah, I lied, my voice hollow. Yeah, I think we did. I could barely look at Sophia without hearing her words echoing in my mind. He's just a means to an end. It took every ounce of willpower I had to keep my face neutral, to pretend I hadn't heard her betray me so casually. But I needed to keep playing my part, at least until I could figure out my next move. Over the next few days, I acted as if nothing had changed. I listened to her as she outlined the plan she claimed would help take down Leo, but every word she spoke felt like a knife twisting in my chest. She told me about the offshore accounts Leo was using, about his plan to move the money once I was out of the way. But no matter how much she claimed to be on my side, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was setting me up. I kept the recording from that night at the bar hidden away on a flash drive, a secret weapon I wasn't ready to use just yet. Instead, I went to Eric, hoping he could give me some clarity, or at least some backup. We met in a dingy diner on the outskirts of town, far from the places Sophia or Leo would frequent. Eric looked rough, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, as if he'd been losing sleep over this mess too. He slid into the booth across from me, glancing around before speaking. You look like hell, David, he muttered. What's going on? I hesitated, wondering how much to tell him, then handed over the flash drive. I recorded their last conversation. There's a lot you should hear. Eric plugged the drive into his laptop, and as the recording played, his face grew darker with each passing word. When it ended, he closed the laptop with a snap and looked at me, a mix of pity and anger in his eyes. Jesus, David. She's playing you like a violin. I clench my fists under the table. I know, but I think she's playing him too. If she's still talking to Leo, she might have a way to turn this around, even if she's lying to me. Eric shook his head. I don't like it. She's in deep with this guy, and you're gambling on her suddenly growing a conscience. What if she's just stringing you along until they bleed you dry? I'm not trusting her, Eric. I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. A few people turned to look at us, and I lowered my voice. I just need to keep her close enough to see what her real plan is. And if I can get Leo on record admitting to his scheme, maybe I can turn it all against them. Eric took a sip of his coffee, his expression skeptical. This is dangerous, David. You're already too deep. Maybe it's time to cut your losses and run. I can't just walk away, I insisted, leaning forward. She has access to my accounts, my firm's secrets. If I run, she could destroy everything I've built. I need to turn this around, but I need your help to do it. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. I'll keep looking into Leo, see if I can find a way to put pressure on him. But you've got to watch your back. Trusting either of them is a mistake. I nodded, trying to ignore the sense of foreboding his words left behind. Eric had been right before, but I couldn't stop now. I had to see this through no matter the cost. That evening, Sophia and I sat together in the living room, reviewing the recording she had provided. I couldn't help but notice the way she glanced at me from time to time, as if trying to gauge my mood. I wondered if she could sense my growing distance, if she realized that I was no longer willing to take her words at face value. We need to get Leo to make a mistake, she said, flipping through her notes. If he thinks we're on the same page, he might let something slip, but it has to look real, like we're about to hand everything over. I studied her, wondering if this was part of the trap she'd set for me. You think he'll fall for that? She met my gaze, her expression sincere, or maybe just a good imitation of it. He trusts me, David. If he thinks I'm still on his side, he'll let down his guard. We just need to push him a little. I nodded, forcing myself to play along. All right, let's set up the meeting. But I'm coming with you this time. No more secrets. Sophia hesitated, but then she smiled, reaching out to touch my hand. Thank you for trusting me, David. I promise I won't let you down. Her touch sent a chill through me, but I forced myself to smile back. I couldn't afford to let her see how much I doubted her. The night of the meeting, we drove to the same hotel where she'd met Leo before. This time, I parked nearby, slipping into the shadows outside the entrance while Sophia went inside. I had a small recording device hidden in my jacket, and I kept my phone ready to call Eric if things went sideways. Through the window, I saw Sophia sit down with Leo at a booth in the corner. He greeted her with a smile, but his eyes were cold, calculating. I strained to hear their voices, hoping to catch something incriminating. You're sure he's on board? Leo asked, leaning closer to Sophia. She nodded, her voice steady. He thinks I'm on his side, but he's nervous. He might back out if he thinks you're going to push him too hard. Leo's smile faded, replaced by a hard glare. He doesn't get a choice. We've put too much into this to let him walk away. If he doesn't play ball, we'll bury him. Sophia lowered her voice, her tone pleading. Just give me more time. I'll convince him, I promise. I gritted my teeth, barely resisting the urge to storm in there and confront them both. But I forced myself to stay put, recording every word. This was the evidence I needed, proof that Leo was pressuring her, that he was the mastermind behind the plan to take me down. But as the conversation continued, a nagging doubt twisted in my gut. The way Sophia spoke, the careful phrasing, the calculated pauses, it felt like she was feeding him just enough to keep him on the hook. Was she really trying to help me, or was she just playing for time, setting up the final blow? When they finally left the hotel, I followed at a distance, my thoughts spinning. I met Sophia back at the car, where she slipped into the driver's seat, her face flushed with adrenaline. Did you get what you needed? She asked breathlessly, glancing at the hidden recorder in my jacket. I forced a smile, nodding. Yeah, I think this is enough to bring him down. She let out a sigh of relief, leaning back against the headrest. Good, then we can end this. We can finally be free of him. I didn't respond, my mind still replaying the conversation, analyzing every word. I knew I had what I needed to turn Leo in, but something about Sophia's behavior didn't sit right with me. If she was really on my side, why did it feel like she was still hiding something? When I returned home that night, I found a new message waiting for me on my phone. A text from Eric. David, something's off. Leo's got connections in law enforcement. Be careful who you trust. The warning sent a chill through me. If Leo had leverage over the cops, turning him in might be harder than I'd thought. And if Sophia knew about those connections, she might be planning to use them against me too. My hands shook as I stared at the message. The walls felt like they were closing in, every shadow hiding a new threat. I thought I'd been playing them, but now I wasn't sure if I was even the one holding the cards anymore. I thought of the recordings, the flash drive, everything I'd gathered so far. It wasn't enough, not yet. I needed something more, something that would give me leverage over both of them. But as I looked around the empty condo, I realized just how alone I'd become. I was trapped between a woman I couldn't trust and a con man who seemed to anticipate my every move. And if I made one wrong decision, I knew I'd be the one to pay the price. The air was heavy with tension as I drove to the meeting spot, a secluded warehouse on the edge of the city, surrounded by rusted fences and abandoned machinery. Sophia sat beside me, silent, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, dark circles shadowing her face, and every few minutes she'd cast a nervous glance at the recorder hidden in my jacket pocket. I knew she could sense my distrust. I could feel it in the way her hands fidgeted with the hem of her coat, the way she hesitated before speaking, like she was searching for the right words to reassure me. But I kept my focus on the road, trying to keep my own doubts from spilling over. We parked behind the warehouse, out of sight from the main entrance. I killed the engine, listening to the tick of the cooling metal in the silence. You remember what to do? I asked, turning to face her. She nodded, her expression strained. We meet him, get him to talk, and then you get the recording to the police. Simple, right? I gave her a tight smile, though my mind was racing with contingencies. Right? Just make sure he doesn't suspect anything. If he thinks we're onto him, he won't. She cut in, her voice tense. He trusts me. That was exactly what worried me. But I didn't argue. We stepped out into the cold night, the wind biting at my skin as we walked toward the warehouse entrance. I slipped into the shadows near a broken window. Crouching low as Sophia went inside to meet Leo. I had a clear view of the main floor through the glass, my hand gripping the recorder in my pocket like a lifeline. A few minutes later, Leo arrived, his silhouette cutting through the dim light of the warehouse as he approached Sophia. He looked relaxed, confident, like a man who knew he held all the cards. He wore the same arrogant smile he'd had that night at the bar, the one that made my blood boil. So, how's our dear David? He asked with a smirk, his voice carrying through the still air. Still clueless, I assume? Sophia glanced in my direction. Just a quick, nervous look, but enough to make me tense. He doesn't suspect a thing, she said, but there was a tremor in her voice that even Leo couldn't miss. He frowned, stepping closer, his smile fading. You seem nervous, Sophia. Is there something you're not telling me? I held my breath, waiting for her to slip up, to give away my presence. But she squared her shoulders, forcing a smile. It's just this is dangerous, Leo. If he finds out, if he figures out what we're planning. Leo cut her off with a sharp laugh. David's a fool. He's been a fool from the start. But you? You're the one who could have made this easy. Now you're getting cold feet. Sophia flinched, taking a step back. I'm doing this for us, remember? You said we'd be free once this was over. You promised. Promises, promises, Leo muttered, shaking his head. But let's get one thing straight. This is about me getting what I deserve. You're just along for the ride. So don't start pretending like you care about him now. His words sent a jolt through me, and I almost moved forward, ready to confront him then and there. But I forced myself to stay still, to let the scene play out. This was the moment I've been waiting for, the proof I needed to take Leo down. I pressed the recorder deeper into my pocket, praying that it would pick up every damning word. But then, to my horror, Leo's expression darkened, his hand slipping into his coat. And if you're thinking of betraying me, Sophia, you'd better think twice. I've got insurance, you know? He pulled out a slim, black pistol, aiming it squarely at Sophia's chest. She froze, her face draining of color, and I felt my own breath catch in my throat. "Leo, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You don't have to do this. We can still." "You don't get it, do you?" he snapped, stepping closer. "This isn't about you. It's about getting what I'm owed. And if you're not with me, well, there's only one other place for you to be." I felt a surge of panic, my mind racing. If I did nothing, he'd kill her. But if I revealed myself, I'd lose the element of surprise, and there was no telling if I'd be able to get control of the situation. My hand shook as I pulled out the recorder, switching it off. I couldn't wait any longer. I stepped out of the shadows, my voice echoing through the empty warehouse. "Drop the gun, Leo. It's over." Leo spun around, his eyes widening for a fraction of a second before narrowing in anger. "David, so you finally decided to join the party. How long have you been listening, huh?" "Long enough," I said, holding up the recorder in my hand. "Long enough to know you're done." He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that sent chills down my spine. "You really think you can beat me with that? You think the cops will listen to your little tape when I've got half the precinct in my pocket?" Sophia looked between us, her eyes wide with fear. "David, please, let's just go. We don't have to do this." "Shut up," Leo snapped, turning the gun back on her. "You think I didn't plan for this? You think I didn't know you'd try to pull something?" I took a step forward, raising my hands. "If you shoot her, you'll never get out of here, Leo. Think about it." He sneered, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the split-second hesitation. It was enough. I lunged forward, grabbing for the gun. We struggled, his grip ironclad, but desperation gave me strength. The gun went off, a deafening crack that echoed through the warehouse, and I felt a searing pain in my shoulder as the bullet grazed me. I managed to twist the gun out of Leo's hand, and it clattered to the floor, sliding across the concrete. Sophia scrambled back, gasping, while Leo stumbled, clutching his side where I'd elbowed him in the chaos. For a moment, we all stood frozen, breathing hard, the tension electric in the air. Then Leo lunged for the gun again, but I got there first, grabbing it and leveling it at him. My hands shook, blood dripping from my shoulder, but I kept my aim steady. "It's over, Leo," I panted, my voice hoarse. "You're done." But he just smiled, a twisted, triumphant smile that made my blood run cold. "You don't get it, David. Even if I go down, you go down with me." I made sure of that. Sophia's voice broke through the haze, desperate and raw. "David, please, just end this. He's lying. He's trying to get into your head." I glanced at her, and in that moment of distraction, Leo made his move. He lunged toward me, but I squeezed the trigger, and the gunshot cracked through the air. Leo fell to the ground, clutching his leg, his face twisted in agony. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and spreading, but he was alive. I stepped back, breathing hard, my hands shaking as the reality of what I'd done sank in. Sophia rushed to my side, grabbing the gun from my hands. "David, we need to get out of here. Before anyone." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. "I'm calling the police. It's over." She stared at me, her expression caught between relief and panic. "David, you can't trust him. He's got connections." "I don't care," I snapped. "I'm done with this game." I dialed the emergency number with my good hand, ignoring the fear in her eyes. I'd made my choice. Whatever happened next, I was taking control of my life back. The police arrived faster than I expected, their lights cutting through the darkness outside the warehouse. I watched them pour into the building, weapons drawn, voices barking commands. Sophia stood beside me, her face pale as she glanced from me to the wounded figure of Leo writhing on the ground, clutching his bleeding leg. When the officers saw the gun in my hand, they moved quickly, shoving me to the ground and twisting my arms behind my back.